Today I'm going to answer if playing hard to get really works. And it was actually all inspired by this comment right here, which ironically, this person has the exact same initials as me, so kudos to you there. But this person asked, can you make a video on how to play hard to get the right way? And here we are today. Now there's a lot to cover, but I think the best place to start is with science. Specifically, scientific proof that playing hard to get works. So perhaps the most relevant study I found to proving playing hard to get works is a study done by a guy by the name of Harry Reese, who I believe works for the University of Rochester. I always butcher the name, I'm sorry. But to quote him, playing hard to get makes it seem as if you are in more demand. We call that having higher mate value, says Harry Reese, a professor of psychology and Dean's professor in arts, sciences, and engineering in Rochester? I'm not good at that. Now, I've long made the case that relationships at their core are nothing more than human beings trying to find the best deal possible. And it turns out Harry Reese agrees with me. To quote him again, we all want to date people with higher mate value. We're trying to make the best deal we can. Now, I promise that's an exact quote from him, not me. But this brings up kind of an interesting question. How do we judge what is the best deal? Well, I actually think the best place to look at how we're judging this thing is based on 6 following criteria. Turns out, I talked about these in a previous video. We call them the commitment cups. Satisfaction, alternatives, investment, urgency, scarcity, fear of loss. The idea is the higher up you have each of these cups filled, the more likely someone is to commit to you, the more desirable you become. But let's read those again. Satisfaction, alternatives, investment, urgency, scarcity, fear of loss. Do you see a trend within those 6 things? Well, roughly 50% of them revolve around making you harder to get. Scarcity, there's no one else like you. Urgency, if they don't commit right now, they're gonna lose you forever. Alternatives, hey, she or he is getting a lot of attention from other people. But this also brings up another interesting point. Is it possible to play too hard to get? We've already established here that playing hard to get seems to work, but what about the other end of the spectrum? What if you're playing too hard to get? Now, if you're not familiar, I wrote this book. This book's called Ungettable, kind of me studying playing hard to get for women. I'm not promoting it. I don't even care if you buy it. Now, what's really interesting is when this book sold and I got to interact with customers who bought this book, I started to notice that many of them took the ungettable mentality a little too far. And in turn, that actually repelled men and women. It turns out Harry Reese actually studied that as well. So to quote him again, Reese acknowledges the strategy doesn't work for everyone all the time. If playing hard to get makes you seem disinterested or arrogant, he says, it will backfire. So you want to play hard to get, but you can't play too hard to get. It's a fine line we're really walking here. And this leads me to my next point. I want to build the perfect cocktail of what someone playing hard to get would actually look like that would be successful. So there are 3 layers that we're going to be talking about with regards to playing hard to get. I know the internet always has you out there with the 6, 7, 8, 10. It seems like it's a list game. You know, who can have the biggest list of what works? But what I've found is a lot of tactical things don't really work when it comes to playing hard to get. It's more mentality-based thing that actually make a difference. And I kind of blame the magic bullet solution mentality. You know, we're always living in this day and age where we expect instant results. And if those instant results don't come, well, we just kind of chalk it up to failure, or that doesn't work, or that doesn't work. But relationships don't work that way. In fact, most of the time, anytime I've come in with tactics, something will happen that we'll never have thought of or rehearsed, and the tactic is obsolete. So what matters more than anything is swagger. And the swagger you need to play hard to get revolves around 3 things. Let's start with my favorite thing, admiration. So after really sitting down and thinking about it for a little bit, I thought probably the best way to play hard to get is to do something that you are admired for by other people, including an ex or a person you have a crush on or whatever. So a few videos ago, I did this really cool analogy called the pedestal theory, where I talked about how human beings place people on pedestals or below them on pedestals. But the idea is that everyone's always trying to date someone who's above them on a pedestal. Well, using that, I thought, well, what puts someone usually above you on a pedestal? One of the best ways to do that is if you admire someone deeply. And I want to read to you a quote I talked about in that video. And if it's true that we want what we can't have, perhaps then the key to playing hard to get lies in doing things the other person can't do. So here's my argument. Do something that the person you like, your ex, your lover, whatever, can't do. And that will naturally make them begin to admire you. But how? Well, I actually think that's where the next thing we're going to talk about comes into play. All right, so the next thing is all about understanding global and local goals within the Trinity. Now, if you're not familiar, you're new to this YouTube channel, one of the things that I'm most well known for is my concept called the Holy Trinity. And basically, it's a pretty simple concept, but essentially you're taking the three most important areas of your life, health, wealth, and relationships, and you're constantly trying to find a way to balance them. But balancing them is almost always impossible. It's an endless pursuit that you're always trying to achieve. But one of the things that I personally noticed when I was trying to balance my own Trinity was the simple fact that I felt like I was on a treadmill. Like I felt like there was no escape or nothing to get excited about after a while. It was exciting originally, it's invigorating to learn something new and want to try to balance your life out, but once you've achieved some level of balance, there's really nothing to propel you forward. And that's where really global and local goals come into play. So for every aspect of the Trinity, you need to have a global goal, something that will take you years to accomplish. And I'll use myself as a guinea pig for your own amusement. So what would be like a global goal for health? Well, for me, it would be to complete an Ironman, a triathlon, swim for a long time, bike for a long time, run for a long time. The whole thing usually takes all day long. To me, that's like just the epic, awesome, health-based thing. So that's a global goal for health. What about wealth? Well, for me personally, I want to be a best-selling author and be able to write for a living. I mean, I kind of do that a little bit, but not really. And that's something I'm very passionate about and want. And then for relationships, admittedly, my global goal is a little weak, but that's because I've kind of already achieved my global goal. I'm married, I have a great wife, but my global goal for relationships is to be the best husband and father that I can be. Global goals take years to accomplish, but you need each one for a Holy Trinity-based thing. And global goals will not happen overnight. You need to hit local goals before you can hit global goals. So that's kind of stair-stepping your way to success. Now, the idea behind the admiration aspect of this is usually no one out there has these goals or hits them or is dedicated to them. So just the mere fact that you're doing this already is something to admire. But your global goals in and of themselves need to be so difficult to achieve that people just will naturally admire that. So those first two things, really admiration and Trinity, global, local goals, are more mindset-based things. The third thing is where we get a little bit into the external-based things, but not really. So, I mean, you think about playing hard to get. Perhaps one of the most difficult issues we have with our clients is the fact that they suck at playing hard to get. Why? They're simply way too available. I like to think of our lives as small little solar system. Each one of us is our own sun. We believe the world revolves around us. It's normal, we do, there's nothing wrong with it. But what's really interesting is sometimes when two suns get into orbit of one another, they can collide, or the smaller one obviously starts revolving around the bigger one. Okay, so this is often what happens in our relationships. You meet someone, you become obsessed with everything they're doing, everything they're saying, you love them deeply, you start to revolve your life around them. Instead of all these other things orbiting around you, you start orbiting around this other person. Their goals become your goals. You kind of lose yourself in the relationship. They know at the drop of a hat you're gonna be there. And while maybe that's really attractive at first, over time that becomes less attractive. It seems like you're dating someone who has no personality, who is essentially a copycat of you. And that's the problem we find in our coaching practice. My number one goal every time I'm working with someone is to get them to reorient their life so that they're not revolving around a boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, or husband, but rather they're creating a scenario where they have friends, family, colleagues, hobbies, health-based things all revolving around them, and sometimes even boyfriend, girlfriend, but we're not going to say that near there and there. Here's the point. Stop being so available. Get your own life. But this doesn't seem like it connects to playing hard to get, does it? But it does. People who play hard to get are naturally, I don't want you to fake playing hard to get. I want you to actually be hard to get. And I want you to do it authentically. So someone who's actually hard to get usually is so busy because they're so passionate about all these other things, tend not to be as available as you'd expect. And perhaps the most beautiful part about this approach is that no matter what, you're gaining something. A new hobby, a new passion, getting an ex back, getting a boyfriend, a girlfriend. No matter what, you can't lose with this approach. And the sad fact is most people are too lazy to do it. The sad fact is most people make fun of you when you start doing it because they're projecting what they wish they were onto you. So it's easier to make fun of you for bettering your life than it is to sit back and actually do it themselves. So what are you waiting for?